Chapter 6, Beyor Towers, Stardate 7509.30. The next solar year after the SS Dome event of 7307, Eldon was accepted for the SSD Academy. He was sent to Norin planet. The Academy covered a large part of the Beyor province and was a model for the rest of the planet. The Sing Swords had long provided model provinces or cities for other worlds. Their organization and quality of work was outstanding due to special wisdom given them by the SS domain. Their models were imitated by most civilizations, whether they acknowledged the source or not. On the high mountain edge of the province was majestic and ancient Beyor Towers. This was a mountain stronghold built into the rock of the mountains during the time of the Brunors to defend their new colony. The SSD Academy had now acquired the rights to this long-abandoned mountain fortress. They would now restore it to a livable and functional condition. To Eldon, it was like a dream to be here. He had heard stories about this place, which were every bit as epic and grand as the place still looked. At the highest peaks of this range is where Beyor Towers stood. For centuries, it was the rock of civilization here in this region of the planet's surface. With 3 tall spire watchtowers at the highest points, this landmark could be seen for hundreds of kilometers. Casting their shadows across the landscape, it was a constant, steady timekeeper. Many locals trusted in the timeless watch of the Towers of Time. Several smaller, more rectangular-shaped towers stood below the 3 tall ones. These lower ones were visible only on one side of the mountains. All of them rose from the rock of the mountains as if a natural and inseparable outgrowth. Lookout holes could be seen in several places on the side of the mountain with the tallest towers. So it was now known that the interior had rooms and many tunnels. This in no way weakened the mountain because of the way it was constructed. Beyor Towers had survived wars, meteor showers, and numerous flying objects impacting it in the past. It was hard to imagine a stronger, more lasting structure. Eldon particularly liked the story in the history of the Sing Swords on this planet of Tazakon Samuel. He sought refuge in the towers after he crash-landed right where the Academy now stands. It was not there then in the middle time of the Brunors. That area was farmland. T-Sam, as he was called, was being pursued by scorchers of Enor. They scorched or drained dry all the energy from his single-person craft. They emerged from the Enor sun on rare occasions when the sun was more active. Some claimed that the scorchers were an intelligent life form because of their deliberate moves on life near the sun. However, it has never been proven that such life forms could live inside or on the surface of a sun or star. Further background to the story is that Enor is the companion star to Sec Nori, the smaller of a double star system called the Enors. The planet Norin, where T-Sam landed, takes a full 125 Earth years to make one orbit around the double star. The orbit is elliptical, coming closer to the large sun and stretching far out around the smaller sun. The planet accelerates near the larger one and comes around that end of the double star in 25 to 30 Earth years. Then on the other end of the orbit it slows and takes nearly 100 Earth years to make it around the smaller one and back to the larger. The part of the orbit near Enor is the warm agricultural time. Then the other 4/5 of the orbit is moderate to extreme cold compared to the warm time. There are always 2 suns in the sky, except for a 10-year period in the warm time. It was in the middle of the warm or Enor time that T-Sam hit the planet. The daytime temperature can get quite high in the middle of warm time. T-Sam could see no shelter around. All he saw was the towers in the distance. He made it to the base of the Beyor Towers mountain and passed out from heat exhaustion. 2 residents of the mountain brought him inside and helped him to recover. While he resided in the mountain, T-Sam learned about the Brunors and their enemies from the lords of Beyor Towers. They told him the towers had been in existence nearly 4 times or orbits around Enors. Tsam obtained citizenship in Beyor province and made it his home. During the rest of his life there, he learned their farming methods and taught the locals about SSD. In time, he was given a position in the Beyor Towers as a counselor and advisor. One of his achievements was the high light of Beyor. Special lenses at the top of the tall towers that focus sun rays where needed for heat, light, and protection at times. These were also later adapted for communications for the entire planet. Another significant achievement was the making of peace with Feldor A faction on the other side of the mountain range. Tsam was the mediator of that long-hoped-for accord. In his later life, as the planet approached the end of an Enor's year, he taught at a school where the SSD Academy now stands. One of the elders of Beyor and a longtime friend said of him, "He kept true to his core values, a model for us all." His final wish was to be buried on the planet instead of his ashes being shot into space, which was a popular custom at the time. After Tsam's death came an intense civil war. The Brunors were finished as a power. The next Enor's revolution brought the worst sun flare disaster in the planet's history. The majority of the population had to evacuate before the height of the warm time, or rather scorch time. A few survived underground somehow. It would be 2 more revolutions around Enor's before the Sing Swords came and built their academy. The location was chosen because of what Tazikon Samuel had done there. That is a brief history of the planet Norin and Beyor Towers from the time of Tsam, all that Eldon knew of the place. Now he was actually there and realizing what a grand privilege he had. The Academy had been there for 1 revolution or Enor's around the double star before Eldon arrived, and Beyor Towers had been there for 9 Enor's, well over 1,000 Earth years. The towers had been uninhabited by any civilization for more than 3 Enor's. The last owners of the land were happy to have the Sing Swords take possession of it for the basic reason that they believed it was a haunt of weird spirits. The idea of evil spirits or demons was not widely accepted, so the terms weird spirits or uncanny phantoms were used for something like this. In any case, it was not where the current people of the land wanted to be. It was considered too great a risk to live near Beyor Towers. Although the residents of the Academy were well aware of the fear of the people, they did not allow that to stifle or delay their project to restore Beyor Towers. The Academy had been there in the shadow of the towers for an entire cycle around Enor's with no bad effects. It was now time, finally, to clean out the towers and restore them to some of their former glory. After being at the Academy for about 6 Earth years, Eldon was assigned to Restore Team Number 3. This team would work the 3rd watch period of night. The nights would now be cooler since the warm time had just passed. The days on Norin were nearly twice as long as on Earth, about 42 hours long, but Eldon had adjusted to that, due in part to the rich energy food provided there. Work proceeded from the top down, and on the 3 tall towers first. In daylight, the majority of the work was done on the outside of the towers. The dedicated work crews worked their magic as they slowly spiraled down the towers. They used the latest anti-grav lifts and DR generators to restore the outside surface. The structural integrity was as sound as the mountain itself. After a few days, the tops of all 3 of the tall towers were restored and shining brightly. The local people were amazed at the sight, but still skeptical that it would all go well. Eldon's team would be doing most of the restoration on the inside of the towers. Their work schedule was at night to speed the process, but also to show the people around there that they were not afraid of the spirits that reportedly come out at night. The 4th watch period following their work period was rest time, so they could still attend classes on a later daytime schedule. Eldon did not care when the shift was, because just to be there and have a share in the work was a great thrill to him. Each night he looked up, being awed and thankful as he entered the Tower Mountain. This event was historic for the planet. the hopes of the inhabitants centered around being put on the map again, so to speak, or getting a new lease on life. This was part of the Sing Sword's reputation. Wherever they settled, there was renewal and progress made. Eldon was assigned to work with Earl Flanger. Earl was taller than Eldon, crowned with dark hair combed straight back to make a high, proud wave on top, with long brown locks on the sides and thick eyebrows and mustache. He wore a sleeveless coat that showed off his muscular arms. His coat and pants were covered with pockets, with various tools protruding out. His shoes were made from an unusual animal hide with fringes all around the tops. His walk was with a certain swagger that disregarded convention, and his talk was laced with slang terms, exuding a laid-back kind of honesty. Earl was experienced on restore projects and would train Eldon. They were transported to the top of the tall towers by anti-grav lifts from the outside, since none of the lifts inside worked. The view from up there was truly spectacular. You could see all of Beyor del Province. Eldon felt like he was on the top of this world. Earl and Eldon were in a room or space by themselves generally, though other workers were in the area. Eldon learned how to degenerate and regenerate with the DR generators. He learned how to walk on walls and ceilings with anti-grav boots. Earl taught him the importance of through-wall testers and how to develop skill at the whole restoring process. After a few work nights, they had restored to halfway down the first tower. Eldon was using a through-wall tester and found something unusual. It was a cavity inside the wall, large enough to be a closet. Closer examination showed that a door had been covered with fitted rocks. Earl was only too happy to take some extra time and open it up. "Slam, Eldon! This is just the kind of nugget we would like to find in this giant gravestone," Earl exclaimed as he hurriedly removed the rocks. Inside was not a disappointment, but a time capsule complete with a humanoid skeleton. "Slamazing! Look at that!" The light shone through the cobwebs to reveal a grave chamber indeed. Shelves held books and tapes from another age. The skeleton was sitting on the floor, leaned against the wall, with some clothing scraps still intact. A broken bottle, a tube, a bucket, and a few rocks were on the floor. "Wow, what a spooky find! Who and how long was... What do you think, Earl?" "I don't know, but this poor Slade may have been trying to hide this stuff from someone. As much as I would like to crack open this nugget, we better not touch anything. I'm gonna call an expert in to check it out." "What kind of expert?" from Eldon. Earl started to back away as he said, "Oh, one of them I'd call 'em bone dusters. They know all about history and artifacts and such. We can call for one or two of those right from the academy down there. So we should be able to know about this find soon enough, right?" "Maybe, Eldon, but it looks like a slam pack of stuff for them to study here." The next night, during a rest period, Earl was telling Eldon a story of his past. Eldon knew it was probably embellished somewhat, because that was Earl. "So we finally found El Paso Village on Dagon 4. We were there to help them rebuild after a battle against Cardengi raiders. But there was no one there." "No one at all?" "No one alive, anyway. Inside a few dwellings, we found bodies of some Dagons. They were women and children only, because the soldiers have terminal disintegrators that vaporize their bodies when they are killed or fatally wounded. That's one slam-kill-pleat way of covering their tracks. But in one rest pub, we found the body of a Dagon warrior, a commander." "Why was his body left there?" Eldon asked with building interest. "I don't know. His disintegrator must have malfunctioned. Well, I guess you could figure the three of us there were just about spooked out, shaking like tree crickets. As we were looking over this dead Dagon and trying to figure out what happened, we heard..." Just then a high-pitched howl pierced the air. Eldon was startled and dropped his drink bottle. The howl lasted for about 7 seconds, going from a high whine to a low growl. "What is that?" Eldon asked nervously, looking around. Slammin' scary, woo-wee! It may be a meerkat, Earl answered. An animal? A rare mountain cat that used to inhabit this area, but I thought they became extinct long ago. Wow, it sounded kind of close. Don't you worry, Eldon. No wild cat dare come inside this tower while we are here under the lights. I hope you are right. Where was I? Yeah, the dead Dagon. Well, we were looking at him, and we heard a sound of talking. It was the chatter of a group of Cardengi raiders. They were coming closer. We had to think of something fast, so I told my two companions with me to help me lift the Dagon up. We lifted him and brought him to the bar and propped him up on a bar seat. His body was not too stiff to sit him there and put his rifle in his hands. Well, there we were, the four of us sitting at the bar. The Dagon was a little bigger than the rest of us. Earl watched Eldon's reaction, and when Eldon started to smile, so did Earl. Eldon did not believe it was all factual and true, but was enjoying hearing it anyway. So when those Cardengi got to the door of that rest pub, guess what happened? What happened? Well, first they were surprised to see us alive. Then they yelled at us. Right then I gave that Dagon's seat a nudge with my foot, and it slowly started to turn. It made an eerie squeak sound as it swiveled around to face the door. The Dagon was holding the rifle, his eyes covered by his goggles, with the sight laser on, looking like he was ready to fire. Earl paused as if to think about it, but he was just extending the suspense. Well, what then? From Eldon. The sight of that Dagon warrior turning toward them was too much for them. They screamed and shot out of there like Vulcan bats flying out of an erupting volcano. Eldon laughed. I knew they were suspicious and afraid of ghosts or zombies or whatever they called them, and they were tired and half drunk anyway. So that trick saved you from having to face those raiders. You could say that. Now just after they took off, I mean like the next second, that Dagon body leaned forward and fell to the floor. It caused his rifle to fire, which I'm sure they heard, but they were scooty down the road, each one of them flailing his four arms. During the next several nights, Eldon and Earl finished restoring the first tower. Now they were in the next tall tower working their way down. They heard the strange howling. It was heard at least once each night now. The locals believed it was some kind of phantom making that sound, but the tower workers did not subscribe to the local superstitions. They preferred a logical, more probable explanation, even though they did not know what it was, and a meerkat was highly unlikely. It was not long before they were about halfway down the inside of the second tower. The work was progressing well, as all could see that two tall towers were completely restored on the outside. The workers were all enthusiastic about the project. They felt that there was nothing to fear or to prevent them from successfully completing the restoration. At the SSD Academy, they often announced reports from around the galaxy of good accomplishments and successful missions of SSD. Today's announcement centered on their work on Beyor Towers. It was sent to all the SSD colonies galaxy-wide. This report included information on what Eldon had originally located in the first tower, the hidden room with the skeleton and ancient records. The room contained a journal which revealed the identity of the person that died in it. His name was Tazikon Jordan, the son of Tazikon Samuel. He had sealed himself in the secret room with all the important records of Beyor Towers to preserve them. The Brunors that were left could not hold off the Sinarese armies any longer, so T. Jordan made a last desperate move to preserve their culture. He believed that sealing himself in the wall and committing suicide was the only way to prevent the total destruction of their memory. It was a short time later, by Enor's standards, that there was a battle for the towers between the Sinarese and Denovan operatives. Because they were so involved in their post-war power struggle, they did not notice the increase in solar flares. They had no time to search the towers thoroughly before they had to evacuate. T. Jordan used a penetrating sealer that sealed both sides of the wall. Even so, there was a small chance his secret chamber would be discovered. But it was not discovered until about 400 Earth years later, when Eldon found it. Also found inside the chamber was the original blueprints to the highlight of Beyor. There was only a broken remnant of one of those special lenses left in one of the towers. Now they could be rebuilt and perhaps even improved. All this was indeed stimulating for all the workers and everyone at the Academy. This night felt somewhat cooler, as the planet now was moving away from Enor and entering on its long run toward Seknori. Eldon felt invigorated by the cooler temperatures, and it helped in doing the restoration work. There should be plenty of time to finish the work before it got really cold because of the orbital position. As he looked out a tower window port, his view was of the purple streams near the horizon, visible only momentarily as the far sun neared its setting. This was just one example of the stark beauty here that Eldon was beginning to appreciate. "You've got time to view, so you've got time to renew," Earl said to Eldon as he entered the room. "Hello, Earl. I try to catch the far sunset each day." "Seen any Beyor bats flying around?" Earl asked. "Not yet, but the shadows are so dark, I'm not sure. I would like to shine a spotlight into those shadows," Eldon said, turning back toward the window. "Well, you know what I say to that," Earl said, opening his tool case. Eldon turned to Earl and said with a smile, "Time to view, time to renew?" "Ha! No. I say if you got time to explore, you got time to restore." A few minutes later, Earl's radio sounded. He was called to another tower. "I have to go to lower Tower 2 for a few. Hang in here and do walls and ceiling, Eldon. We still have to slam on this night shift. Call me if you find any skeletons." "Okay, Earl. I won't need to call you." This was Eldon's first time working alone in the towers for any length of time. He was confident in his ability now. He sang old Earth songs to himself as he worked. Then he heard the howl. It was the same as the other nights, but earlier. After a while, Eldon heard something else. He stopped his DR generator in time to hear the end of it. It sounded like footsteps. But then he thought maybe it was rocks falling. Then, every time he used his machine, he thought he was hearing something in the background. He put his machine down and walked over to the back part of the room, where there was a door with a corridor leading outside. With his small hand light, he could see that the corridor ended at a tall, open archway. As he approached it, he could see a path that led from it into the mountain. Also, there were some rocks that lay on the path. Eldon wanted to explore, but he thought it better to go back and restore. When Eldon got to the inside door where the corridor began, he tried to close the door, but it cracked and then fell to the floor. He did not like the unsecured room the way it was, being open to an unknown area. But Earl would be back soon, and then he would tell him about it. Eldon picked up his generator and turned it on. Within 3 seconds, there was the howl again. It was louder, much closer, and the growl at the end was a piercing warning to its prey that was designed to paralyze with fear. Eldon switched off his DR machine, but kept it in hand. He slowly walked toward the back door. He heard a panting and sort of whining sound, but it must be a wild animal, he thought. Then in the corridor he caught sight of it. It was a dark figure, apparently not human-like. 2 yellow-orange glowing eyes were looking at him. It stood about the height of a man. Eldon and the creature stood still and looked at each other for a long moment. Then the sound of an anti-grav lift came nearer, and the light it was shining on the outside of the tower could be seen. The creature now dropped to its foreleg position. It jumped to the archway, briefly pausing to look out at the lift passing by. The light from the lift revealed the details of the creature's appearance as rays came through the holes in the corridor wall. Suddenly it let out a sort of scream and ran down the path and then climbed the mountain side extremely fast. Eldon was able to retain a vivid memory of what he had seen. Its head was like that of a cat, but with a longer nose. The front legs were small, with paws, more like hands than feet. The hind legs were large and possibly had 4 toes on each hind foot. The tail was short but moving wildly. It seemed to be multicolored with very short fur. It took a minute or so for Eldon to regain his composure after this frightening sight. Was this a meerkat that Earl had mentioned before? But it did not look like any that Eldon had seen in pictures. However, he now knew the source of that terrible howling. There were a few more sightings of the Beyor howler after that. The Sing Swords explained to the people of Beyor province what the creature was, and that it was not an evil phantom. So it was decided that the land around Beyor Towers, especially the mountains, be a protected area for the howler and any like it. Of course, the wildlife could not enter the towers like the creature had done in the past, but there were caves and other refuge for them now. And so the people and the mountain creatures lived side by side in peace, without fear or harm. With the restoration of Beyor Towers and the rebuilding of the high-light lenses in the towers, a new era of peace and prosperity began. New applications to the lenses meant that they could achieve a glory even greater than the past. With the addition of satellites, the benefits of the highlights could be felt planet-wide. Eventually, Norin came to be known around the galaxy as the place of the highlights. Eldon learned many lessons for future life there, and will never forget it. Chapter 7, The Dark Expanse. Stardate 7805.07. Someone once said that space is sterile death wrapped in darkness and silence. Eldon never thought of it in quite those terms until 7805 on the old Stardate system. That was when he first encountered an infinite slod. In space travel between stars and on rare occasions between galaxies, you come across what are known as slods. These are traps to be avoided at all costs. In terrestrial terms, it would be like hitting quicksand or a whirlpool. All the known ones are marked with warning buoys. Ships that still use hyperspeed stay along tested routes that are a safe distance from slods and other dangers. The more popular INTREB, or Intergalactic Transit Webwork, a network of wormholes or tunnels that is thousands of times faster than hyperspeed and does not require a ship to use, avoids slod-type dangers as well. These modes of transport are relatively safe. The problem is that slods can expand or even drift in space. If they were to encroach upon a hyperspeed route, a ship could hit it and suddenly drop out of hyperspeed. It would be like falling off a cliff with a dead ship and no direction out. A victim caught in a slod has always been considered lost without hope of return. If the slod and INTREB tunnel come in contact with each other, it would be equally disastrous. The sides of the tunnel would eventually break down. A traveler could fall out of the tunnel into space, into the slod, or maybe worse, into a closed loop with no escape forever. The third possibility has never been proven. However, a small percentage of INTREB travelers have entered the webwork and never came out, to anyone's knowledge, that is. For these and other reasons, many have vowed never to travel through space. A large part of the anti-space travel groups is the human-like Earthites. They say that life is so fragile and meant to be lived out in a Terran or Earth-like environment, not in the hostile, deadly environment of space. Being a fragile Earthite myself, since I come from Earth, I would agree with what they say. But like most people who are inhabitants or citizens of the galaxy, and not just a planet, I want to see what is out there. There is an alternative to space travel that is becoming more and more accepted in the human-like creatures. It is the ultimate way to explore. Farsight, remote view, or even God view as some call it, you can become somewhere without physically being there. not many have learned the mental discipline to tap into the so-called universal mind. Obviously, the ability to do this would unlock many secrets and be far superior to any other mode of space travel. There would be no limit to distance, time, or place. The physical body would not be exposed to the hazards of space. Those who have visited other worlds or galaxies this way have given accurate descriptions of these places. They knew nothing of them beforehand, except maybe the name of the location. Even this way to travel has its drawbacks, and it has not been perfected. Only the Sing Swords have perfected a way in their SS domes, but it is specialized for their purpose. A far-sight type of exploration, to see places without actually being there, made Eldon think of the way space exploration began. In the dark times for Earth, it was a similar way, but with mechanical devices and on a minute scale. Unmanned probes were sent to nearby planets, nebulae, and stars. These sent information back to Earth using radio waves at the speed of light. These waves could take from minutes to many years to return. One probe that Eldon read about was historically unique. It was sent to Betazin, a near star only 10 light-years distant. But there was a problem with the propulsion system, and communication with it could not be made after 2 years. The probe was believed to be lost. During the next 30 years, many advances were made in technology with the help of the Orions. Then the first manned ship was sent to Betazin. The ship took 1 year to get there, the crew being in hibernation. After their arrival, to everyone's surprise and amazement, a message from the first probe reached Earth. The manned ship was still in the vicinity, their mission being 75% complete. The crew was notified of this by hyperspace communication. The crew found the probe intact on the large frozen planet Betazin 7 as they made their initial recon flyover. It had been 40 solar years since that probe was sent to Betazin. It had been sitting on that planet for 10 years after its first and only transmission at light speed. 1 year later, not 30, the manned ship returned to Earth. This event was quite celebrated as a milestone and was called the Betazin 40. That is, it took 40 years for the future to catch the first probe and get there before its transmission reached Earth. These accounts of the small beginnings of space exploration fascinated Eldon. He realized that those early probes were like the first few footsteps in a 20-mile hike, as they used to measure terrestrial distances. And that was just for this galaxy. Include other galaxies, and it is a million-mile odyssey compared to those first steps. These were the things that occupied Eldon's mind on this early part of his trip to the next SS Dome. He was thinking that not much is really known about sloths because of the extreme danger. Not even robotic probes could send signals or be retrieved. The theory says the sloths contain singularities or black holes. It is also believed that all matter in the sloths is gradually broken down or pulled apart. So if a person got caught in it, it would cause disorientation, then madness, and of course death. Now to the actual event. On our trek to Ketriel-Mon in the Calavo star system, we, that is 2 HSCOM-2 class small ships, were on their way to the next SS Dome, this one of truly galactic proportions. From over 100 star families or civilizations, delegates were to attend by means of the 3 main modes of space travel mentioned earlier. The 10 delegates of our 2 ships were enjoying a smooth hyperspeed trip thus far. This was not necessarily the oldest, but definitely one of the slowest modes, at the equivalent of 1 solar day to 200 light years. To reach Calavo by 7807.14, we had to take a rarely traveled route across Star Desert A5.008. As we cautiously started out across the Star Desert, we set monitors to watch gravity sensors closely, and then entered hypersleep hibernation for the long crossing. This was standard procedure, especially in certain parts of the galaxy, to use space fabric feelers, as some called them. Then suddenly, hypersleep was prematurely interrupted. Monitoring systems recorded a shudder and then a bright flash. This collision, or whatever it was, caused us to drop out of hyperspace. Eldon woke to the sound of alarms and then voices. It was the captain calling for status reports. The members of the ship responded. "Engines, we are offline. Power low but climbing. Communications are out, Captain." 66% of tie beam field has been broken, Eldon reported with a severe tone. It was his responsibility to watch the tie beams between ships. The view screens were just static at the moment, so the captain immediately opened the forward ES port. The companion ship was floating to a position too close and above ours. Both were clearly out of any flight position. The tie beams hold the two ships at a safe distance and attitude as if they were one craft. This is necessary when two or more crafts are in the same hyperspace bubble. The beam field could not be restored. The space fabric sensors detected no abnormalities in the area, so the captain decided to send two outside. Beyor, Eldon, and Solarzi prepare for EVA to check damage on tie beam nodules. Admittedly, we were all more than a little nervous because of what had happened, and that not much was known about this region of space. We were disabled near the halfway point of the star desert. However, the systems of the ships were coming back to normal levels, including communications. The captain wisely held off on sending a distress call until we determined if we could repair the tie beams and also who, if anyone, was in the area. Everyone on our sister ship was fine, and it was reassuring to see two of their crew outside doing the same checks we were doing. The two ships were able to line up for flight again. The tie beam nods were mostly corrected with a simple alignment. So it appeared that everything would be back to normal, and we could be back on our way again. One of the crew repairing the other ship looked over at Eldon and waved. Then Eldon heard, "I hope you have learned a lesson by this, Eldon, not to put your gum on the intake cover." It was Datar talking through the comm link. He had been employing more humor lately, which was a new thing for Eldon. He could not think of a funny reply, so he said, "Well, I don't think this one was internal, but an external problem." Datar tried to sound calm and confident when he came back with, "Oh no, Eldon? If it was not your fault, then what? There is nothing out here. Tss, nothing out here. Tss, static. Out here." Eldon was alarmed by this weird echo, turned his head, and said, "What?" He could not speak now, as the strange static grew in his ears. Then they all heard the warning. "Negative gravity field approaching. Static. Inside now. Tss, approaching. Tss, back inside. Static," with beeps. The four men outside, now injected with fear, resisted the temptation to look out at the black unknown as they sealed tool pouches and headed for the entry doors. But each could not help but wonder what could be coming toward them in the star desert, where the nearest star is a faint point of light approximately 6,000 light years distant. Within a few seconds, the men were inside again, Datar being the last one to enter, but before the door closed behind him, terror struck. It was an invisible tentacle of a giant monster that grabbed Datar's craft from space. The impact blasted the other one away, causing it to flip end over end. That craft had enough power to stabilize and move closer to the other, which was in the grip of a dark area. We later learned that this dark area was an expanding arm of an infinite slod, the worst kind. Of course, space was dark, but this area was more intensely so because no stars could be seen through it. This was one of the characteristics of sloths. We must have clipped an expanding arm of it when we dropped out of hyperspeed, but such a thing was rarely heard of. The craft now caught in it was harder to see, even though being just maybe 30 meters away. Eldon's craft could not get any closer without it being caught in the slod. The crew members scrambled to do what they could before the other craft totally faded out. They sent a small drone with a cargo bay toward the craft, but seconds after it entered the dark area, the edge of the slod, it lost power and floated past the craft. They fired an emergency tether toward it, but it would not stay on a straight path and snaked around wildly as if someone was shaking it. Their sister craft was in grave peril and slowly fading from sight. Was there no way at all they could help them? As Eldon and his fellow shipmates watched helplessly, another sight now horrified them. A man floating away from the small ship, now receding into blackness. It must have been Datar who had floated out the open exterior door. He was not moving, apparently unconscious. Then suddenly he pulled out a tool and was fumbling with it when a line shot out of it. It was an emergency tether gun. He had little or no control of his actions now as the gun floated away from him. Eldon took this as a message from Datar to try this now. "Let me try it," Eldon said as he grabbed the tether gun. In the same moment, Eldon was outside on a tie line to his ship, readying the gun. It looked as though Datar was close enough to reach with the tether since he was still near the edge of the slot. Eldon aimed and fired the first shot. It came within what looked like 3 meters of Datar. It was too far from him, but he made a reach for it. Eldon looked at the register on the gun as the tether retracted. It read 4, representing the distance, and a Z, a symbol meaning it was a miss. He shot again. It seemed to move in slow motion after entering the slot. No one knew for sure how time was affected in the slot, but it was not a normal movement. This shot came a little closer to Datar, and he reached, almost touching it. Eldon checked his register on retraction. It read 2Z. The distance reading was no longer accurate, but the distance between them was widening. He got the third shot off. This one seemed to take forever to get to the edge of the slot. The solid end of the tether came straight for Datar, then stopped just within reach. He made a weak attempt to touch it. When his finger touched it, Eldon saw scene after scene in his mind of their childhood and travels together up to the present. Then it flew off to the side out of reach. Eldon was getting discouraged now as he looked down at the reading again. It said 0.9-1Z. It was on target for an instant, then missed. Eldon tried one more time. It was moving straight toward the target, but stopped this time a little farther from him. Datar did not try to reach it. He just looked at Eldon. Had he just surrendered to hopelessness, or was being in the empty space of the slot beginning to affect his mind? Eldon could somehow see Datar's face and the dull look in his eyes. Eldon was frozen for a moment and did not retract the tether. Was the slot having an effect on his mind too? Then, as the tether was coming back, the ship in the slot was slowly enveloped in blackness, and within seconds Datar too disappeared into nothingness. The surviving spacecraft, after getting Eldon back inside and leaving a warning buoy, was on its way before there was another violent expansion of the slot. Eldon, like most people of his planet, the Hearthites, did not give way to extreme emotions when losing someone in death. But he was never the same and did not make close friendships for a long time. He meditated often about his friend, the other 4, and about what happened out there. He also wondered about the readings on the gun he used for some reason. He felt that those symbols, 4Z, 2Z, 0.9-1Z, could have some alternate meaning, but he had to admit that being in such close proximity to the slot could have done something to his mind and viewpoint. He now appreciated more the fragility and preciousness of our microscopic existence in the universe. In hyperspace sleep, Eldon took comfort in dreaming about the time they would all be restored when finally reaching the source. As they neared the Calavo system, Eldon felt as though he was awakening to a new reality. more real and reliable than the past tragedy, which seemed like ages ago. He was being raised from a dark pit all the way up to a mountain with a shining beacon of light at the peak.